But now on to George. Never Teach an Ocelot to Needlepoint, a selection of skeptical essays. George has written and produced 6 independent CDs, concert DVD, published 2 books, recorded over 700 episodes of an award-winning podcast, emceed countless science conferences, was a TEDx speaker, has been the drummer, musical director for the Philadelphia Funk Authority for over 20 years, and has even performed for President Clinton. He has traveled 4 continents with his friends, promoting science, critical thinking, skepticism through story and song. George is a multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, storyteller, science advocate, producer, composer, heliocentrist, plus so much more. Well, like 2 things more. Without further ado, let me turn this over to Gio by saying vibraphone Gio.
Thank you, Bill. Oh my goodness. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Virtual claps. I so appreciate it. Yes, cheers. I have a podcast that I do every week. Just last night, as a matter of fact, we recorded our 700th episode, 13 years in. Can't quite believe that that's where we are, but that's where we are. We did a live one last night on the YouTube, which was a blast, a real fun time. Normally, it's just me alone right here with this microphone and no one paying attention. And last night, it wasn't that. It was live on YouTube, and we had a wonderful time. Well, as part of my podcasting enterprise, there are people that subscribe to the show. And if you subscribe to the show, you get a weekly letter from me. And the weekly letter sometimes is just information about what's upcoming, or sometimes it includes an essay or 2. And over the last 5 years, I've just written a slew of essays that tend to be of a light nature. And I thought it would be fun to share some of these with you. I sort of collected a bunch that I thought kind of had a bit of a theme that maybe you'll recognize and catch. And if anyone has any questions or comments as we're going through, maybe between essays or at the end of it all, we can chat. I got to say, Bill, I like that your team lunch photo had the picture of a kitten. Is that on the menu for the lunch, or is that just something that was I thought that was nice. Anyway, this first essay is something that I call Bats. This is called Bats. All things being equal would really cause a significant impact on the calculator industry. Remember calculators? Remember when typing in 5318008 was a way to have it spelled boobies? Remember how great that was? Sure, you had to turn the whole thing upside down to make it work, but the same was true of any marsupial you were trying to milk. And speaking of breakfast, if you order a rasher of bacon at dinner at a diner, you'll mostly get a funny look. Same is true if you use the descriptive modifier listed by the items in the menu to order them, unless you're doing it ironically. Then it's way hip and adorable. I'd like the famous, delicious turkey sandwich and a gallon of the exhilaratingly freshly squeezed parsnip juice, please. Parsnippy goodness, just like Father Giuseppe used to make. Which makes me wonder, how would I choose my Pope name, given the opportunity to be pontiff? I realize this happening is highly unlikely, but the way that last year has gone, I'd say there's a minuscule yet non-zero likelihood of the white smoke blowing my way when and if the old Kathy has to choose a new boss. Anyway, Pope George Ringo is too obvious and someone else's joke, so maybe something like Agnosticus. That'd be a real pisser, no? Pope Agnosticus. Maybe Godzilla. Ooh, I like that too. Pope Godzilla. Where was I? Oh, right, bats. Bats always fly to the left when they leave caves. It's true. There's something in their genetic programming that always causes them to exit a cave by flying all in the same direction. It A, prevents them from smashing into each other, B, bats, and C, it's all part of the vast, humongo liberal conspiracy trademark. Did you know the word conspiracy and constipated are only different by like 12 letters, yet both are equally full of shit? Stick that in your Diebold voting machine and tabulate it, you bastards. Sorry, I didn't mean to lash out. I'm just so passionate about bats. Bats are the only mammal that are capable of flying. What about squirrels, you say? Can't some squirrels fly? Well, technically, squirrels are not mammals flying. They're actually reptiles in tiny fur coats flying. True. And we all know that there are plenty of reptiles that are capable of flying, especially those that use the new Capital One Venture card and who earn up to 100,000 bonus miles. Capital One offers straightforward rewards wherein you can earn unlimited 2 miles per dollar on every purchase. Plus, you can redeem rewards for all types of travel purchases made using any website on any app. What's in your wallet? Lo, what's in indeed? Let's see. Pope, bats, what else? All right. Did you hear the one about the kid who asked for a model for his birthday and all he got was a kit to build an airplane? Did you know that if you drown enough lead singers, you can make a coral reef? And did you know the guy that shot Harvey Milk was really lactose intolerant? And did you know that a painting by Goya is worth a lot of beans? You did? Oh, okay. Well, but here's the thing. Did you know that my OkCupid profile has managed to hook up with my eHarmony profile while my JDate profile watches from the closet dressed in an Annie Oakley costume? Because even I was taken by surprise with that one, which goes to show you never can tell which direction a vacillating fan is going to blow. But seriously, that reminds me that in parts of Asia, people believe that if you fall asleep with a fan turned on and blowing, you will suffocate during the night. For real. This is called fan death, and it's the belief that running an electric fan in a closed room with an unopened or no windows will cause death. Despite no concrete evidence to support the concept, belief in fan death persists in Korea, and also to a lesser extent in Japan. They literally sell fans with built-in timers to automatically shut off after a certain amount of time. Totally real thing. It's something to remember when you wonder how people can believe certain things, especially when there's no evidence for their belief or actually solidly contradictory evidence. Google Koro, Koro, for an equally confounding delusion based on zip nothing. Point being, if you're going to make meatballs, regardless of your basic cooking process, have them simmer in a sauce for as long as possible once they're cooked. It'll be worth the effort and the wait. For more recipes, go to georgehrab.com. Here's hoping all your cave exits are ordered and involved no collisions. That should give you a taste of what you're into for this morning, just so you're aware. Koro, Koro, by the way, if you're unaware, I'm sure most of you are aware, but that is an Asian delusion that men's penises are shrinking. This is like a large problem in a significant percentage of the population that thinks either someone has cast a spell on them and is making their penises smaller over time, or that it's a malady of some sort. There's entire industries dedicated to dealing with Koro, which is I enjoy that fact very much. Here's another piece. This is called Lyrics. So I'm rolling over and over and back and forth and up and down in my brain cogs what to write about today. And wouldn't you know it, I'm stumped. And yet, for some reason, I'm reminded of the late era King Crimson song, Into the Frying Pan. Here's the lyrics. I was just now thinking about the jaws of life, how they chew you up and spit you right back into the frying pan, and how life unwinds round and around and up and down. You think you're fine, but then you're back in the frying pan. The frying pan. But then I'm also struck by another late era Crimson tune from just one album later called The Power to Believe. And these are those lyrics. She carries me through days of apathy. She washes over me. She saved my life in a manner of speaking when she gave me back the power to believe. Both of these haiku-like sets of lyrics come from the same singular mind, namely the immeasurably talented Adrian Belew. Mr. Belew, for those of you unaware, has performed with everyone. Full stop. Everyone. In 1977, he was discovered in a hotel bar by Frank Zappa. He then left Frank's band to tour with David Bowie, which was followed by him joining up with Talking Heads and then a newly reformed King Crimson. Throughout all this and beyond, he managed to collaborate with artists ranging from Paul Simon to Trent Reznor to Cyndi Lauper to William Shatner. Yes, Captain frickin' Kirk. That's all to say, don't his words just nail it? You can sit and talk to me until you're blue in the pineal gland about cosmological versus Descartesian dualism, But the words that this guitar singer from Kentucky spewed out in 2000 and 2003 seem to quite perfectly outline the tragicomic adventure that is this modern human condition. I mean, there is something so vibrantly insightful and prescient about these two disparate paths of thought, especially since they spewed forth from the same spiral notebook. Namely, sometimes you feel like no matter what, it's just not going to happen. The call's not going to come. The idea will refuse to form. The grace will not be delivered. The news will be dire, and the outcome will not be good. Yet other times, there is such an effortless spirit of satori and universal benefaction that it makes you just want to plotz into your Slurpee. What is that? How is that? And why does it seem so heartlessly important to think of and remember, especially days like today? I don't know. Maybe there's this immeasurable amount of anxiety and uncertainty flowing around that has to, if only for the sake of mathematic equilibrium, be balanced with some commensurate amount of understanding and cognizance. Maybe we tap into these reservoirs with mysterious spigots whose designs befuddle us, or perhaps it's like those frustrating, touchless, sensor-based faucets in airports and schmancy restaurants. Sometimes you wave your damn arms back and forth like an extra in the movie Grease during the hand jive number, and other times you just calmly extend your hands like a dashboard Jesus. The water will do what the water will do. In moments of shade and darkness, I try to remember that the sun is shining brightly somewhere on the planet. And conversely, in times of arresting illumination, I try to remember that dark corners exist. I hope that you can all bathe peacefully in light and luster. Those two songs, like I said, are from 2000 and 2003. One is on an album called The Power to Believe, and the other one's on an album called The Construction of Light. And if you are unaware with King Crimson's later music, it's very dark, it's very complex, but it has absolute moments of just mind-numbing beauty that is embedded in this very complex music. And Robert Fripp, if you're unaware, he's been the one consistent member of that band for 53 years now. And he is like a monk who plays heavy metal guitar. It's pretty astounding. He's an English gentleman who just is a furious monster. And he's wonderful in terms of his philosophy about what music is, what art is. Check out his writings and his websites as well for a really interesting, not necessarily skeptical, but just interesting artistic take on how the world works. Okay, this next one I'm excited to read because it's perfect for this particular crew. Oh, look at that. You have the Discipline book. Oh, John has the Discipline. Is it great, John? That's a transcription book that was done by a former member of the ensemble.
Okay, I guess you know about it. I wanted to make sure you know about it. If you want to order it yet. Maybe the second printing you can get if you don't have this one already.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're going to dive into this for a second. Crimson nerds here.
Yeah, I don't want to
Crimson nerds. Forgive us. No, I appreciate that. It's to transcribe, especially the three middle albums from the 80s of this particular band. To transcribe it is much akin to trying to translate the Rosetta Stone. I mean, it's unbelievably difficult what's involved in this music. And one of the former members, like I said, took the time, he and some other collaborators, and wrote out all the parts, all the guitar parts, all the bass parts. I believe it's all the drum parts as well are in there, John. Is it it's a full transcript of everything, which is just, oh my gosh, it's just instead of a chocolate fountain at my wedding, I'm just going to have that book in the corner, and that'll be the same thing to me, basically. So, not that I'm getting married at any point, but if anyone knows of anybody. Anyway, moving on. This is one that's perfect, I think, for my Lehigh Valley friends. And maybe you're not from the Lehigh Valley, maybe you're joining us here virtually, but this is something called Music Fest Food. So Music Fest, Bethlehem's yearly festival held the first week of August, is inherently about the music, or the music with a K, whatever. There are over 400 individual acts that perform on 17 stages over 10 days in styles varying from rock to pop to polka to jazz to world to bebop to barbershop to tributes to blues to big band to punk to funk and beyond. The crazy amount of disparate tunage that one can hear while casually traipsing about the festival grounds is really quite impressive. Just last night, I heard some Siberian surf rock, an acoustic looping genius, and a jump swing horn combo, and a band playing the entirety of Edgar Winter's Frankenstein, including the whacked out transitional middle drum solo. I heard a bluegrass quintet and either a pretty accurate Evanescence tribute band or the actual band Evanescence. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the food. Yes, along with the 17 stages and 400 musical acts, there are 63 individual food vendors vending their off-delicious foodstuffs to the strolling patrons of Music Fest. Over the years, there has been such a quantum improvement in the diversity, quality, and variety of the food available that to casually call and dismiss what's being produced as, fair food would be an insult to the inimitable legacy of funnel cake. Historically, the kinds of foods available at a music-based fiesta like this one have been limited to the deep-fried heritage of festivals past. The aforementioned funnel cake, poorly cooked corn dogs, and incessantly disappointing caramel apples spring to mind. And while variations of those items are still available, the absolute culinary paroxysm that has occurred over the last decade is one to behold, or to betaste, I guess. During the festival, I've had a smoked turkey leg. This beautiful hunk of crispy, meaty turkey was perhaps the best smoked meat I've ever had the pleasure of its juices spreading down my chinny chin chin. This was an absolutely Australopithecine-sized bone and protein combo that satisfied me to the last grizzled gnaw. A serving of garlic Parmesan pierogi fries. Yes, you read that right. Pierogi fries. What are pierogi fries, you ask? Frickin' delicious, I answer. Frickin' delicious. These were available from, of all places, a vendor called Take a Taco, and almost made up for the fact that Italy essentially sat out both world wars. Imagine a standard deep-fried pierogi, subsequently sliced up lengthwise, refried on a flat top, then smothered in a surprisingly subtle garlic Parmesan sauce. If Stanislaw August Poniatowski were alive and planning his recoronation, this would be the first 4 items on his celebratory menu. A Belgian waffle sundae from Bethlehem's own Bethlehem dairy store, also known as The Cup. This is a Music Fest standard and is absolutely perfect in its simplicity. Take a 5x5-inch freshly made Belgian waffle, throw a decent heap of soft serve vanilla on top, douse that with a homemade fresh chunky strawberry sauce, then finish it all off with an almost obscene hummock of fresh whipped cream. Waffle, ice cream, strawberry, and whipped cream. It's like a version of the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, but in dessert form. It's perfect. A Mr. B's double cheeseburger. There are certain kinds of burgers that are reminiscent of different environments. There are the charred, big mouth burgers that are suggestive of outdoor barbecues. There are the small, thin, slider-style burgers that help you to recall countless road trips and late-night snacks. There are the semi-boiled, specifically meaty and simple kinds of burgers that remind you the best school lunches had to offer. Mr. Bill's keeps its pre-cooked quarter-pound patties at the ready in a special cooktop slurry, then quickly re-sizzles the burgers as they are ordered. What you end up getting, especially in the double, is a meaty homunculus that is so juicy and flavorful that it requires no added condiments. A perfect, simple white bun rounds out the experience, so that for 1 second after you bite into this American sandwich, you're instantly in 3rd grade. It's Friday afternoon, hamburger day, and the lunch cart is slowly rolling down the hallway. A donut. Well, not just a donut. I should say the donut. Honestly, it's not often that one encounters a platonic ideal, but when one does, and it has this glaze on it, holy shit. This was the donut. Like, everyone else needs to stop trying to make donuts donut. I was doubtful as I walked by the sign that simply said, giant donut. I mean, in a world with white chocolate raspberry donuts and maple bacon coffee donuts and matcha latte sweet ricotta lapsang souchong mint foam donuts, a simple glazed donut whose entire raison d'eau is just being giant? How good can that be? And only 5 tickets? I mean, a Diet Coke is 4 tickets. What kind of scam is this? And then, first off, it's a freaking giant donut. This thing has about a 10-inch diameter. If Jack had been holding on to this donut at the end of Titanic, the last 30 minutes of that movie would have been very different. This is a donut that saints can wear on their heads when they are getting their icons painted. This is a donut that AAA recommends you keep in the trunk of your car. This is a donut that would require Lake Huron be drained and replaced with espresso in order to accommodate the adequate dunking. It's a big donut. And then the first bite. Imagine a stack of perfectly cooked, still warm pancakes that has magically transmuted all of its layers into a single, flawless, thick bite. A little bit of a toothy pushback, a ton of flavor, and no cloying air pockets or internal dough webbing, and that glaze. I instantly thought of that quote by Homer: "Let me not then die ingloriously and without a struggle, but let me first do some great thing that shall be among men hereafter." And then I also thought of that other quote by Homer: donut. I think the fact that the booth where giant donut is sold only makes about 4 of these at a time so that each one can be fresh and perfect really adds to the insurmountably excellent culinary experience. If you make it down to Music Fest, do yourself a favor. Have one, honestly. Oh, and the music is pretty good too. Oh, that made me want to have coffee. I have to have coffee after that donut-gasm. Did anyone have the giant donut at Music Fest? And then back when Music Fest was non-virtual? Seriously, life-changing.
In the before times.
In the before times. It's usually under the bridge there. Right under the bridge is, in the international sort of, the polka area. That's where it is. And oh my goodness. Okay. Here is a piece that's called Fear. So I went to go hear famed British physician and writer Ben Goldacre give a talk in New York City about how every scientific trial ever conducted in the history of test tubes has been intrinsically flawed. And that's essentially that there's a Twinkie's chance in Chris Christie's cupboard that we'll ever be able to develop a protocol that will be impervious to the failings of the human animal. One of those feel-good lectures. Sheesh. Anyway, I'm sure I'll chat more about that at some point, but that's not what I want to write to you about. What I want to write to you about is what happened after the talk, which was I got in my car, and while driving back to Pennsylvania, I listened to a good chunk of the first night of the Republican convention. I'm not going to get into the specifics of what I heard, and even though I'm pretty sure that most of you, upon listening, would have had a similar reaction to mine, which could be fun to willingly get all snarkified about. At this particular time, I want to avoid wading into the political swamp that was the 2016 election. What I do want to talk about, however, is the thing that pervaded the tone and the timbre of every speech I heard to a pretty alarming and uncomfortable degree. That alarming and uncomfortably pervading thing was fear. What I heard was a tremendous amount of fear emanating from my radio speakers. Fear for safety, fear for the future, fear for change, fear for loss, even fear of fear. It got me to wondering, is fear a good motivator? Of all the things that we learn, how many of them are motivated by being afraid? And of those things that are, how well does that motivation work? When we're kids, we're taught to look both ways before crossing the street. I'm trying to remember if I was afraid of what might happen or if I was informed of what might happen. I don't think the potential visage of my mangled child corpse was proffered to me as a reason to follow road safety, but it might have been. It's hard to remember. My mind was mostly occupied with wondering when and where I'd get to finally meet the $6 million man. Did traffic safety sink in because I was scared that an accident might happen? Or did it sink in because I was empowered with the understanding that Lil Geo versus a 77 Mercury Monarch is empirically not going to end well? I think it was the information that drove me, not the emotion, even if I was still too young to really understand either. Maybe it has to be fear-based when you're younger, but to me that feels kind of icky. I don't think that parents tend to much follow the old convention of using scary folklore to teach children proper behavioral practices anymore. Or at least I think it's pretty universally frowned upon. You don't really want your daughter getting ready for bed because she thinks that the soul eaters will suck her life essence out through her face if she's not asleep by 8 p.m. I assume that kind of thing is just bad parenting. But is it any worse to tell a kid they need to stay nearby when we're all at a park, or else some scary stranger in a van might drive up and snatch you and force you to watch episodes from the 8th season of Who's the Boss? I don't know. I do know that Yoda said fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Pretty accurate seems does that. And yet fear of failure might be a great motivator. What struck me, however, while listening to the frothy anxiety of the convention speakers was that I think we tend to make rather poor choices while we're afraid. We make decisions that are based more on in-the-moment relative anger and base self-preservation. That might be a fantastic game plan on the savannah where fear-based motivation prevents you from being eaten, but in a complex societal world full of action and consequence, reacting from fear tends to bring out the worst and shortest term kind of thinking and acting. Those actions often have repercussions that could have been avoided or at least considered with calmer thought. Shouldn't we know that about ourselves? Shouldn't we be proud of our ability to take a moment and override the limbic system and not react purely in fear, especially in situations where the threat is not immediate, but more conceptual? Maybe that's it. The more a dangerous or potentially harming idea or event becomes concrete, the more that fear should act as a motivator in determining what actions are appropriate. For example, there's a huge brown bear running straight at you while wearing a bib with your picture on it. Shoot him or run away as fast as you can. 2 guys are kissing in a park. Wonder why you feel weird and determine how much their endearment is really affecting your existence. I know this is an incredible oversimplification, but so is the plot to Avatar, and that thing made like over $2 billion. I just hope, really, really hope that when people's fear buttons are pushed, they can realize that historically, very little good comes from it. Oh, and one more thing. In the first half of the 20th century, polio was a crippling disease that was affecting tens of thousands of children, and by the 40s had developed into what American historian William O'Neill called the most serious and easily the most frightening public health problem of the post-war era. Victims were quarantined, so much so that in some instances parents couldn't even attend the funerals of their own children. There was a tremendous amount of fear influencing the actions of those yet unaffected by the disease. What happened, however, was a realization that being scared and worried did little good. Quarantine was fruitless, and that perhaps a better course of action was a unified attempt to find a vaccine and cure. The National Foundation for Infant Paralysis was set up, and the March of Dimes fundraising program was started. Over 100 million people donated money to the March of Dimes, and over 7 million people donated their time and labor. It can be argued that these 2 proactive and positive measures helped Jonas Salk and his researchers eventually discover the vaccine for polio. There was even a point where Salk's research felt so unproductive, he considered giving up his work. Apparently, he sat in a park one day debating whether to continue, and as he watched children running and playing on healthy legs, he realized his awesome responsibility to future generations. He decided right then and there to return to the lab and to work harder than ever before. I don't think people gave to the March of Dimes out of fear. I don't think that Salk returned to the lab with a renewed vigor and subsequently worked his tail off because he was scared. I think there was a universal realization of the importance of the project, the seriousness of the problem, and a comprehensive rational distribution of whatever resources were available to solve the task at hand. No banning, no running away, no segregation, no blame, and no attempts at feeding the base and darker portions of our animal brain. They eventually succeeded beyond anyone's expectations and virtually eradicated the polio virus. Wouldn't it be something to see that kind of a unified, rational approach to the problems and concerns we have today? Maybe. That was from 2016, obviously. And it is curious to look at the sort of the similarities and dissimilarities between the polio and between COVID and what was going on then and what's going on now. It's sort of interesting to see the lessons learned and the lessons not quite learned. Are we doing okay, everybody? Are we all right? Are we doing all right? Where are we here? I got a couple more, maybe. Are we good? Bill, how late should I go here? What's good?
Most talks go for about an hour.
Okay, cool.
But you can stop whenever you like.
Yeah, I'll do a couple more if everybody's cool. This is even a year into it. Doing the virtual performances is still a very curious thing, and I so appreciate everyone's time and hanging out with me this morning and all of us. So here's a bit of a sillier one. This is called Service Bell. Let me ask this real quick. Do you feel as stupid as I do ringing the little bell at the service counter? Back when we were allowed to leave our living rooms, good times, I remember always feeling quite weird having to personally press the peel device in any store or service-based business. You know the deal. You've stopped into your local guzzle and pump and sip and crunch, and after having fueled up your vehicle with the appropriate amount of fire liquid, you go inside to diligently pick out exactly which seasonal variation of chocolate-filled goo egg is going to satiate your shame-based cravings. As you proceed to walk over to the checkout, you'll notice that the place is entirely empty and quieter than paint drying at a grass-growing convention held inside the Bell Labs Anechoic Acoustic Attestic Center in Murray Hill, New Jersey. There's no one at the counter, no one in the aisles, and no one even peering out from behind the human-sized skull advertisement featuring the MLB-endorsed visage of Tug McGraw. So you take your sweet damn time getting to the front in hopes that Mary Lou or Trevor or Urup will eventually return from wherever the hell they may be taking their meth break. You should take what should take you less time to accomplish than a 7-section sanctioned bull ride transforms into the stroll equivalent of a Grateful Dead Space Jam during which no one appears. You cough lightly, you sniffle, you so subtly squeak your shoes so that someone will hear that there's a customer waiting by the counter. But that ends up being as effective as paying for your Grubhub order with a Blockbuster card. So while you're waiting by the checkout, your bemused, glancing gazes manage to eventually fix upon the little silver and black service bell sitting all by its lonesome on the counter right next to the Kinder Joy display, sporting a handwritten sign in half pencil, half crayon that says, "Ring for service," with the backwards R backwards in the Little Rascal style. As you sheepishly stare at the bell and hear the audible ticks of the wall-mounted clock that's been hanging there since before 9/11, you realize that no one is ever going to come out, ever. You then decide to, as gently as possible, to press the tiny tack-like button on this little inverted Tibetan monk bowl in the hopes that a pleasant like ring will emanate and inform the staff that, yes, there is indeed someone waiting to make a purchase. You placidly flick the lever on this hummingbird's diving bell, and by some Harry Potter-like purely supernatural and impossibly obnoxious fashion, it goes ding, clang, clang, pow, bong. And Mary Lou or Trevor or Urup and all yell from the back, "Okay, we're coming," with an annoyed intonation that reveals to you that they left off the end of the sentence, which was probably something like, "You impatient walrus." I was once in a 24-hour supermarket at 1:12 a.m. in the morning. I spied that the checkout conveyor had something on it that I literally assumed was an item the last customer had forgotten to pay for. As it turned out, my assumption was incorrect. Way incorrect. Poised on the produce treadmill was nothing less than a full-sized cowbell with a sign attached that said, "Ring cowbell for service." Let me say that again. Ring cowbell for service. Yes, that's right. Cowbell. Apparently, you were supposed to actually lift up this heifer-based warning klaxon and swing it back and forth over your head as if you were some Nordic farmer trapped in a whiteout. Yes, indeed, they wanted you to indicate that your need for immediate service by violently clanging this metal box as if you were auditioning for Third Shepherd in the stage production of Heidi the Revenge. This store, at 1:12 in the morning, was insisting that you simultaneously channel both Christopher Walken and Will Ferrell and act as if you're playing Ben Franklin during the denouement of some pivotal scene in Town Crier 2, Cry Hard. So, of course, as I attempted to quietly ring the cowbell, which makes as much linguistic sense as gently use the jackhammer, it sounded as if all the cows in Brazil simultaneously decided to recreate the opening sequence from 28 Days Later. This, of course, resulted in Chad or Brad or Tiffany or Savannah walking out from the back with a look on their face that reminded me of how my college cello techniques teacher glared at me when I jokingly called her instrument a super ukulele. Not good. At that moment, I wanted to say, I'm sorry I followed instructions and rang the dang cowbell. Yes, maybe I'm the dick. But said, thanks, sorry. That being said, boy howdy would I love to casually go into a store today and ring a bell right now. Ring any bell right now, actually. Wouldn't that be lovely? Thank you. Did you know that, oddly enough, Brazil actually has the most cows in terms of. If someone asks you which country is raising the most cows, I would say U.S. No, hands down, no question. But no, it's Brazil. Brazil apparently raises the most cattle. That's strange. Again, yet another useless fact for you for this morning here with the Lehigh Valley Humanists.
Is that why the rainforest is going away, for more cows?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. Knocking down, what is it, an acre every 6 million acres a second? What's that hard to believe number? It's 1,000 acres every 20 seconds or whatever. Bananas. Okay, let me just check here. This is a fun one. This is called cashews. Lots of food. Lots of food. That's all I have left in my life is food. But it's okay. I did a number of, during COVID, I did a bunch of sort of, as many people did, a bunch of changes to my apartment, my condo. I repainted, I put up a wall, I redid the bathroom, I did another thing. So lots of projects were happening just to have something fill the time, especially early on when there was still some semblance of, hope. But so this was sort of written after some of those projects. The projects continue unabated in the condo, or the convict's projected candor up the bombo, whichever you prefer. Personally, I prefer the former and not the latter. I only prefer a ladder if I need to hang a painting up somewhere high or change the candles in a chandelier. Not that I get to do that very often, or ever really. How crazy is that, by the way? Chandeliers used to have candles in them, like for real tips full of fire candles, burning their wicks for kicks and everything. I guess some still do, but apart from my last rewatch of Amadeus, I've not seen any lately. Apparently, there used to be these intricate pulley systems that would facilitate the lowerage and riserage of the entire Shan device so that one could light, extinguish, replace, de-waxify those Bernie sticks as necessary. Pretty nuts, no? Not to mention candelabras. Those still exist, but mostly next to busts of Beethoven. And by the way, electric chandeliers are common and lovely, but electric candelabras are cheesy. I guess it's solely because of the convenience. Although if you rename a candelabra a lamp, then you're okay, at least according to the gods of IKEA. And speaking of nuts, how good are cashews? So good. That's how effing good. Any food that sounds like a sneeze, but is delicious, regardless of which iteration of its nutty essence is prepared, is both super and duper in my book. I mean, seriously. If I could eat handfuls of any food without consequence, I think I'd spend most of my waking hours scarfing 9-pound bag after 9-pound bag of cashews. Ever have raw cashews? Oh man, such buttery deliciousness. I know that roasted and salted and candied and honey smacked and chocolate covered and vista pinned and goober dunked and space dried and cozy booted and slam horked are all delicious variations of this heavenly seed. But there is something about a raw cashew that just makes my nuts list. I'm extremely proud of that triple entendre. Please remember me for that, if nothing else. And yes, Martha, it is a seed. Apparently there's the cashew tree, Anacardium occidental, which has on it what are called cashew apples, which produce the cashew seed, which after a far too involved dance to elaborate here, I get to eagerly stuff into my COVID-avoiding yapper with great haste and regularity. These seeds are part of what's called an accessory fruit. An accessory fruit is a fruit in which some of the flesh is derived not from the floral ovary, but from some adjacent tissue exterior to the carpel. Get it? Nice. And speaking of technical explanations, this is my favorite sentence from the cashew Wikipedia page, if not perhaps from all of Wikipedia. Quote, "The shell of the cashew seed yields derivatives that can be used in many applications, including lubricants, waterproofing, paints, And starting in World War II, arms production. Arms production. Arms production. Cashews. Tell me, Mr. Prime Minister, now that the war is over and the Axis powers are no more, what would you consider your proudest achievement? My dear man, when ruminating on the overwhelming ramifications of this unprecedented arming of nations, it is with a resolute focus and unhindered assurance that the unquestioned apogee of the efforts of so many must undoubtedly be that when pressured, and when it mattered, a great nation of heroes was able to finally determine and subsequently execute the means to convert the humble cashew into a weapon of war. This will be our collective legacy. Boom. I so hope that some specific torpedo or grenade launcher relies exclusively on some derivation of cashew butter. Did I mention I like cashews? Although all nuts are pretty good, except for the evil chestnut. Ugh. I can remember purchasing, preparing, roasting, and serving a barrage of chestnuts one holiday season many moons ago, stupidly assuming that 2 centuries worth of Western literature's Christmas storytelling and tradition would indicate some veracity in the inherent culinary value of said nut. However, far from the experience being one of seasonal goodness filled with succulent flavors, the piquancy I tasted made me long to lick a dolphin's ass. What a batch of disappointingly mushy and flavorless excreta. If Tiny Tim had served me these, I would have kicked him in the other shin. Boo. I mean, how hard is it to make a nut taste good? Come on, Santa. Point being, the projects continue unabated in the condo. I bought some shelves and a nice group of plants and succulents and installed them all in the library. So lovely. What a subtle but great change. If you need to spice up your domicile, get a plant. Seriously, if you're not good at keeping stuff alive, just consider it a rental. For $10, you can have one corner of your house look verdant and alive for a few weeks. If it dries out, you get another one. All good. And finally, I think to wrap this up, I'm going to read something that's called Sunset. And again, for you local Bethlehemites, a lot of this takes place on the canal path right here along the Lehigh River, which is one of my absolute favorite spots in the world. I love the fact that living in Bethlehem, I live in a city, basically. I don't use my car, back again in the before times. I don't use my car during the week. I walk everywhere. And then within 10 minutes, I can be in the middle of the woods on a river, walking on a gorgeous canal path, 11 miles towards east and that way, or 7 miles towards Allentown that way. And it's an absolutely wonderful place. So this is something called jogging at sunset. While running yesterday, I managed to observe what may have been not only the longest sunset of my life, but quite possibly the most beautiful. It was definitely the most gorgeous sunset I've ever seen here in Bethlehem, and that's really saying something, because boy howdy, do we have ourselves some killer solar denouement in town. I'm not sure if it's the topographic layout of the valley or some remnant ferrous particulate that's been floating around since the heyday of Bethlehem steel, but we really get some impressive end-of-day light shows here. What added to the eyeball-numbing effect of yesterday's sunset was my fortuitous timing of just having turned the corner of my 6-mile run course. If I'm jogging that particular path counterclockwise, I tend to alternate directions for sanity's sake. I run through town at the start, then I head down to the Lehigh River's canal path and run on upstream, bound for my forgiver, all the way back to the center of town. This means that at just before dusk, I was running west into the sun with a front row seat for an unexpected show that was just about to start. As I settled into a decent pace on this flat portion of the run, I was slowly yet completely overwhelmed by what began to unfold before me. Presented in stark contrast to the cerulean sky above the horizon was a line of wispy clouds, effortlessly resembling a lifetime supply of cotton candy for Godzilla, while the golden, kiln-like skyline managed to glow more and more intensely with each passing minute. Adding to the overall incredible nature of the sky's display was the fact that the river, running along my left, and slightly less damp than me, reflected the incandescence so purely and intensely that I half expected to see Anakin and Obi-Wan having a lightsaber fight within its ripples. This was something I had never seen or experienced before. Sky above on fire with pink accent clouds and miles of river looking molten. It was unreal. And it just went on and on. I'm not sure if my pace managed to somehow perfectly match the azimuthian descent rate of the sun or what, but from mile 3 to mile 6, I had a perfectly framed and continuous display of nature that had me literally cheering. Adding even more to this moment was the fact that there was no one else in the canal path. I think I might have passed one guy valiantly trying to fish back at mile 2, but otherwise, this was a completely private exhibition presented in the largest theater ever built. It got so incredible that I wanted there to be someone else, if only to prove that it was actually happening, and not that I was having some run-related hypoxic delusion. Although screw it, if I imagined it, who cares? It was quite a show, and easily worth the brain damage. During this solar spectacular, I tried to recount any other overwhelmingly beautiful sunsets that I've been lucky enough to see. And though no specific examples come to mind, I did think of 2 sunrises that were particularly interesting. The first was a sunrise that I watched the morning of my 20th birthday. I had stayed at a friend's house cavorting until it was much, much, much too late. Then in lieu of staying over, decided to drive back to my parents' house. Realizing that the summer sun was about to come up, I went to a public overlook that had the island of Manhattan as its vista and privately watched the day begin on my 3rd decade. It's nice. The second was a sunrise I watched in Spain in the beach resort town of Malaga, where my folks and I were visiting my sister who was spending a year studying abroad. We arrived at our hotel super early on the first day of our visit, and I decided to sit on the balcony of our room and watch the sun come up over the Sea of Sardinia. I intensely watched the lovely red sphere rise up out of the water and was calmed and impressed with the very zen-like proceedings until I looked away for a moment and realized that I had burned a hole in my retina. Holy shit. I'd been staring at the sun for a solid 10 minutes, and now I would have to live with the rest of my life with a gigantic white dot right in my field of vision. Panicked, I did what any high schooler would do, and instead of seeking medical attention, I kept my mouth shut and hoped for the best. Luckily, the white spot faded away after 20 minutes or so, but sweet Jeebus was that a perilous third of an hour. Yikes. Regardless, there were no eye injuries yesterday, and apart from my Achilles burning like a mofo, all was well and quite luminously beautiful. Here's to hoping all of your sunsets are molten and reflected. Oh, thank you for the virtual claps. I so appreciate it. So just a little selection of what's rolling around in my brain. And now, questions about skepticism. Isn't it true that... Now let's rip on homeopathy for an hour. I don't know, Bill, does anyone have a question or a comment or would like to share maybe their favorite Music Fest food or...
Yeah, there are some comments in the chat.
Oh, okay. I see Brian raise his hand there. Brian?
Yeah, hey, George.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm great. Always appreciate your show. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I have a question for you that maybe you're uniquely positioned to answer. As both a humorist and a skeptic, yes, there you go. I'm really interested to hear what your take is on the role of humor and what it, what role it plays for individuals and, society, and perhaps that can lead into kind of your, motivation to pursue this humorous path in life.
Yeah, it is fascinating that the people who, over the last, I would say, decade, if not even more, even over the last maybe even 20 years, the people who have had often the most prescient, the most incisive, the most, the clearest opinion or viewpoint on political goings-on, on national goings-on, on cultural goings-on, tend to be comedians. They were Jon Stewart. They were Stephen Colbert. They were late-night hosts. It's amazing how there is something about comedy that allows you to sort of strip away an artifice of, I think it allows access to the subject in a different way. And I think it allows a reflection on the subject in a different way. And there is a freedom, I think, that comedy allows. And I think in the last 20 years, especially when dealing with the news, and the largest problem that I think, not I, but many people have sort of observed about the news is this idea of equal time, or both sides having a valid point when discussing whatever. So when you're talking about vaccination, you bring on the person who is a proponent for vaccines, and you bring on the anti-vaxxer, and they get split equal time, 5 minutes each, or whatever the environment may be, because we want to hear all sides of an issue, as opposed to saying, no, all the evidence is saying that the anti-vaxxer shouldn't be even on this program, let alone given equal time. And it's this, many news organizations are so concerned about looking biased that the concern for bias overwhelms their need to actually present facts as being facts. Well, the comedian doesn't have that concern. The humorist, the observer of political behavior, doesn't have that concern, because number one, it's usually a centralized opinion that's being presented. It's not two comedians, like here's the left comedian and the right comedian, or the pro and the anti-comedian. It's a singular voice that allows you to say, this is bullshit, this is not true, and this is what's happening. Or look at all this stuff that has happened. Look at how this person behaved. Look at how this organization behaved. And that is an absolute essential sort of freedom and tool that I think is taken away from a lot of news reportage, because they can't say, this is what happened and this is why it's important. It always has to be, it looks like this is what happened, and some people are saying this is important while others are saying it's not important. And that balance tends to dilute everything to a point where you can't actually make a point. So I think the humorist has, within the cudgel of weaponry, a singular position that can cut through a lot of the BS. And I think that's what's really important. And that's what's wonderful. That's why, I mean, for me, watching Stephen Colbert during all this, during the last 4 years, has just been so refreshing. And in terms of, because it's insane behavior or silly behavior dealing with something which is so deadly serious. So that's why I adore Monty Python. The whole thing of Monty Python I always adored were unbelievably intelligent people being tremendously silly. Like stupid people being silly is not, I'm not interested in that. Smart people being silly, I could watch all day, because it's a different thing. So that's what I think allows the comedian. That's a really great question. I want to look over in the chat here and see if anything was. Oh, John did catch my yes lyric. I appreciate that. Thank you, John. There's always an Easter egg or two in there. Any other questions there? I'm trying to see. Who else? Anybody else want to? I hope that made sense, Brian. I don't know if that made sense. I hope that made sense. Yeah,
no. And again, I guess I was looking at, I always remember a quote from Robert Heinlein that humor is how we as humans excise pain of a sort, within ourselves. And I think that ties in exactly to what you said, in that humorists are positioned to kind of be at that interface of catharsis, to kind of pull the bullshit and the fact together and tickle people's brains to kind of, to excise that pain of, a little bit of confusion. Why is our world, turning away facts? That kind of thing.
Yeah. It is again, it's kind of this tool or a viewpoint, or like a pair of goggles that they can put on and cut through. And there's a disarming nature to it too. There's also, if you can be charming and disarming and truthful, humor allows you to do that, because you can, hopefully people can on some level. I know I keep harping on Colbert, but when he was doing the Colbert Report, the original program he did, which was under the guise of a conservative, super conservative character who was presenting the news of the day ironically, he said that, he had conservative viewers who watched the show and appreciated it, because not that they didn't get the joke, they got the joke, but they didn't get the level of the joke or the depth of the joke. So they could watch it and appreciate the show, and liberals could watch and appreciate the show as the commentary on conservatism. It's such an interesting dance, that irony and satire it's such an interesting, curious dance, and it just allows you to comment on things that in a way that straight commentary sort of doesn't allow for. Or it's much harder to do.
You know, on a lighter note, Rush versus Yes on stage, battle it out. Who wins?
Well, it's got to be, the thing about Rush is their consistency over the years. If you go to a show and you see Rush in 1978, and you go to the 40th anniversary tour and see Rush in 2015, there is not going to be a large difference in quality of performance. There's going to be, sure, the production will be different. The explosions, the animatronics, the lasers, all that stuff will change over time. But the inherent performance of those three musicians over the span of their 40-plus year career is pretty consistently extraordinary. You go see Yes in 1978, your DNA is going to be rewritten. No question. It's going to be mind-numbing. You see Yes 3 or 4 years ago, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to sit. And I go, I pay my money. It's like donating at church. You know, it's like, I don't believe in this crap anymore, but I grew up here, so I'm gonna, you know, it's good for the community. I'm gonna pay my ticket, and I'm gonna go see this version of Yes, whoever happens to be in it at the time. So live on stage, I would say it's no contest. You know, at their peak, that's a different conversation we could have. At their peak, I think Yes would, because of their 5-member potentiality versus a 3-member thing. I think if you were to go 1977 Yes versus, let's say, 1982 Rush, ooh, that would be a very, very difficult, close one. But over the span of their career, Rush, those three guys were from their first quarter note downbeat till their final last little riff from Garden Road, or whatever was the last song that they played in Ontario for their final show. They were consistently fantastic live. And everyone else has signed off, but that's okay, because I will talk about Rush all day.
I was trying to plan a Scott Pilgrim versus the Universe kind of battle to give you a more humorous.
Oh, yes.
Music so seriously, I forgot that you go down there.
No. I love questions like that, because there's often, it helps you to re-examine what you like about a particular ensemble. And it's in terms of a skeptical nature of it, sometimes you have to question yourself, like, why do I like this? Do I like this because I've always liked this, or do I like this because I actually like it? You know, the stuff that you enjoyed listening to when you were, or that became your own when you were 12 to 14 to 15. You know, I've said this before, but music is the very first thing that is our own when we're growing up. Music is you have all these rules because you're at home, you have to do homework. This is when you go to bed. This is the clothes that you wear that we bought for you. This is your room. This is where you sleep. This is what you're eating. This is where you're going to be from this time to this time. After that time, you're going to go over here. And this is your life for the first, 18 or 15 plus years of your existence. And then you get to that point where you're 12 or 13 or 14, where you can start saying what music you like. And there's no external influence on that. Yeah, your parents might say, hey, check this record out. And you might like it, you might not, or whatever. But what you decide to enjoy, it's like your first autonomy. And that's why that music that you loved when you were 12, 13, 14, 15 stays with you the rest of your life. It stays with you because it's your first real autonomous decision that no one else has any influence over, that then you can retain. And you say, I like Cyndi Lauper. I'm going to listen to Cyndi Lauper. I like Duran Duran. I like Talking Heads. This Duran Duran album is my album. I'm not sharing it with my sister. My dad doesn't like it. Mom doesn't like it. I don't care. I'm going to put my Walkman on and I'm going to listen to this thing until the tape is stretched and doesn't play anymore, because I at heart am a wild boy and I'm so excited. And that stays with you the rest of your life in a way that other things don't. So when you're 30 and 40 and 50 and you're finding new music or you're discovering stuff, it can't have the same sort of lasting emotional, attachment to you. So yeah, so this is a serious thing, especially for me as a musician. I mean, I think the value of music, and that's why it's so important, and it's so wonderful now that kids can be exposed to a huge swath of music. I mean, what is available to a 12-year-old now. I mean, I'm sure it's overwhelming, and I'm sure that's the consequence of it, or the price of it, that can be overwhelming sometimes. But the fact that there isn't a radio or a TV channel dictating, this is what you like, this is what you will listen to now, this is what is popular, and you enjoy this, which is fine. Popular stuff is fine. But that if a parent can go, hey, the Beatles are kind of cool. I kind of like you might like this, or hey, here's Yes in 1978 live. It's kind of weird, but you might like this. Or subsequently, the child might go, hey, this is Katy Perry, or this is Sia. You might like this, and the parent might go, cool. I think that's very different about sort of what's happening now, is that parents and kids share their music in a way that previous generations just never did. 1977 bootleg of Yes, Quebec City. Oh, I bet that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is really fun having teenagers. Myself will be driving the car, and I can just recall a song, and they can just pull it up on the phone and just play it instantly. And
that's the thing. The ownership is very different too. I mean, again, I talk about this a lot, but growing up for us, I mean, I'm sure most of us here are of a similar age. I mean, the ownership of the music was different because you had no information about it, and any scads of information, any little glints of information you could get, you would hold on to, like, my precious, this little you would read, at least I would read the liner notes of the cassette. You would hope that as you opened up the cassette, there would be a fold out J sleeve, and oh yes, the lyrics are here, cool, and who produced this, and who was Daniel Lanois, and oh wait, wasn't he on that Peter Gabriel album? And you'd find that other thing you'd read. Now, oh, I just heard of this band, Kansas. What's Kansas? Wikipedia. And you have the entire life of Kansas in front of you that you can look at. Oh, this guy was here, and then the bass player left, and then this was in the beginning. This song, they re-recorded this, and here's the producer, and it's all there available. Where to us, it was like, oh, I think I know a guy 2 towns over that has a copy of Cream magazine from 6 years ago that has an interview with Steve Howe. Oh, let me see if I can borrow that. So the archaeological nature of discovering who your band was and what they were about, again, added to that ownership. And so it's a different thing. And I think you won't have quite the same kind of fans necessarily anymore, which is fine. I think I would defer to have a variety of music and a variety of artists, as opposed to here are 5 people you can be into because that's all that you have access to. What else, Bill? Who else is out there? Who else wants to go on video and ask me a deep, deep question?
Well, I have a question. I think you may be uniquely qualified as being, living in the area, but also traveling around the world, really seeing different organizations. And, looking back at our own organization and even the Lehigh Valley Skeptics, they're pretty small. Membership's fairly stable, but you would think as nons and more secular people are out there, we would be growing. So what are we doing wrong? What can we do better?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a funny question for sort of any organization anymore. I think there is option paralysis on some level. There are so many things that one can do nowadays, especially in the States, in terms of organizations, in terms of last minute things, in terms of when a lot of the humanist organization, atheist organization, non-belief organization started, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have access to 10,000 hours of lectures and Richard Weissman videos. We didn't have that. We had to sort of get together and talk about things and share, much like the music thing, collect things and get together and have speakers come in and do presentations and stuff like that. I think now that there is such an access, again, it's the price. Everything has a price, right? So the access of, you want to watch Christopher Hitchens for 7 hours on YouTube? Go for it. You can do it. We don't have to have an organization bring him in and present a special thing. I don't know. I think there is a deep inherent value in having a small local group that can get together and can know each other and can just feel and can commiserate on certain things or celebrate certain things. I think there's nothing wrong with having a 10-member group, a 20-member group. Yeah, sure, the 1,000-member group is fantastic, and there's all kinds of wonderful things like that. But if you can think of whatever organization you're dealing with as just copacetic friends that are slightly more organized than regular friends, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think to have, what's your goal? do you want to share interesting stuff with people that are interested? You're doing it. Do you want to get together every now and then and eat cats? You're doing it, whatever may be the thing that you're sort of interested in. Here it's a Sunday morning and we've got a handful of people sort of hanging out together. And I think that's especially in times like this where we can do virtual collections like this, let alone we can get together. I don't know if you really want to expand, I'm trying to even think of organizations that are successful and what that necessarily means, or the headaches that can sometimes present when you have hundreds of people in an organization. I'm not sure. I think again, there is an option overload. We have so many things we can do, especially this is sort of talking in the ideal time when one is allowed to leave one's house. There's always talks happening. There's always all kinds of things going on. And if you want to do it, you do it. If you don't, in the last minute, you don't. Let alone being able to have access to websites and YouTube videos and stuff that exists. I still think there is an inherently special and unique thing in doing something live and in person, whether it's a performance of music, whether it's a comedy performance, whether it's a lecture. There is still something about air molecules vibrating, whether it's a harmony of guitars or harmony of thought. There is still something about a room full of people receiving information together, which is inherent to the human condition, which is so. That's why I think some of us are starting to go really batty, because we just don't have that now, and we need that. We need the communal fire. We need that thing, which we'll get back to. I have every belief and understanding we'll get back to it. So I unfortunately there is no. What you need is use this app, and you'll have a better thing. I'm sure Meetup has all kinds of recommendations for what can attract people. I'm sure there's all kinds of recommendations for expanding your voice. But be proud of what you have. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Looking in the
quick
chat
question
here.
about the podcast. When you do all your different voices,
yeah,
I presume you do pretty much all of them except your mother, I think, who hasn't been on a few episodes.
Yeah, Mom is real. Everything else is fake. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can expand on your inspiration for that, and you have to do like tons of takes and cut them in half a dozen times before you get it just right.
Oh yeah. So if for those unaware, there are certain characters that appear in my program on the podcast that I do. There's a gentleman called Rupert McClanahan who is an unidentified Celt of some kind. I don't want to say necessarily what he is because my accent is not accurate enough. Who reads about indestructible bastards. There are people that have survived accidents and airplane crashes and being, Phineas Gage having the railroad spike go through his head and stuff like that. Who else is there? There is a professor named Damian Hanji. He is an Eastern European of not necessarily known origin who deals with facts that are just so unbelievable, facts that'll F you up. My characters are basically an accent, which is sort of the laziest kind of character you can do. Growing up Ukrainian, I'm first generation Ukrainian, so my parents were born in Ukraine. They came here after World War II. They were kids. They met here and married here and had me and my sister. But we spoke Ukrainian at home. So I have a proclivity for Eastern European sounding kind of accents because of my knowledge of Ukrainian. And then that expanded to, my poor brogue and my poor English imitation. And my two of my best friends growing up were Jewish, and I would hang out. And Michael was my one very good friend, and his grandfather would sit and tell us stories, and he had the coolest voice, and he would just talk about these things. It was endless. No, Michael, listen, you don't know what you're talking. It was like a cartoon. I mean, it was such a cartoon voice. That was his voice, and I would just sit there and listen to Mike's grandfather talk. He would drive us to movies and stuff because Mike's mom worked all the time, and so his grandfather would give us rides to the theater, and we would go and watch 4 movies in a day. And he had this thing where, as he was driving, he would accentuate his point by stepping on the brake or the gas. So we would be in the car. Like, Michael, here's the thing. Listen, they don't know what they're talking about. They're crazy about it. It's not true. Listen. And we just be in the back and it was like the best Disney ride you could possibly have. And so I just sort of embedded his voice in my head, and he became a character that talks about, I think he's my favorite character. He's a Rabbi Menoishe in Terrorberg. And he's not a rabbi, he's a rabbi. And he talks about grammar. He talks about English grammar. Like people write in with questions about, when do you use either? When do you use like grammar questions? And for some reason, this rabbi answers the grammar questions. There's something so silly about it, which I just love. So, there's when you're doing character work in terms of a sketch, or in terms of like if Mortimer calls, that's another character. There's this old man that calls the show and basically just berates me. Last night on my 700th episode, I did Mortimer live. So the Mortimer part was pre-recorded, and you just record it with all the spaces left in it. And hopefully with enough practice as you do it live, I can answer back. I have a script that I'm watching, and I know the Mortimer parts, and I know my parts, and I've recorded it so that hopefully there's just enough space between what he's saying and what I'm saying. And I know it's obnoxious to refer to him in the third person, but it's just what Mortimer's saying, what I'm saying, and with just practice. And I have little notes sometimes saying like, take your time here, like you have to stretch, like really pause here, or say this line fast because he's gonna interrupt real quick, or I'll re-edit it. And it becomes a fun kind of skill. What I like to do is long single takes because it feels more natural that way. It feels more like a conversation. If you can have the one character speaking as sort of organically as possible, so that then when I reinsert myself responding to myself, it really feels like a conversation. And that's, among my favorite things to do are those little bits, especially when Mortimer's being particularly nasty to me and he doesn't understand what I've said and I have to repeat things. There is just something so stupidly fun when I'll say, it was at 7, and he'll say, what? And I'll say, it was at 7. Because there's no need to have that in the sketch. There's no need for me to repeat a line to a character which doesn't exist, asking me to repeat something because he didn't hear it. It's so stupid, but it's so wonderful, and it just makes him very real. And so they're very real in the back of my brain. But it's accents essentially, and sometimes Mortimer has this sort of voice, just kind of here, and he's always on the phone. And Mortimer happened because I literally read it was an advertisement in a magazine for this bra that was called Sassy Backs. Maybe people have heard of this. It was this bra that didn't leave lines. Like apparently that's a concern as you remove a bra, sometimes it'll just dig in and it leaves dig into the bra wearer's skin. And this apparently had some kind of mesh that was wide enough that it wouldn't leave, traction. It wouldn't leave ski marks on the, and I had this, I was reading an Entertainment Weekly, and there was an ad for Sassy Backs, and I literally just started reading it out loud in Mortimer's voice, because that word Sassy Backs just seemed to scream Sassy Backs. And now every time before I do Mortimer, I have to say the word Sassy Backs, because sometimes I forget, like you forget where the character lives in your head and in your throat. And I'll think, is he here? Is he here? And I go, Sassy Backs. And there he is. And he's just right. Yes. And he's sort of got this New England kind of accent, sort of. And it's a strange thing. But I wish I had saved that ad. I threw it away, but I wish I had saved it, because that company should get a percentage of every time Mortimer shows up, because it was purely because of this. Because the text on it, the writing on it was so superlative, talking about the unbelievable comfort, the unimaginable comfort of Sassy Backs, relieving back pressure like no other product in the history of man. It was just like, it was so weird, and it just screamed for this old guy to read it out loud. So, yeah.
Very cool. Is most of your following local, or I don't know? Have you?
Oh no, I am unknown locally. I am. It's astounding how unknown I am locally. I actually enjoy the fact that I am kind of so unknown locally. If I have a gig, like a solo gig locally, if 5 people show up, it's fantastic. I played a Tuesday night in Melbourne one time, and 120 people showed up. I mean, literally, it was like I've done shows in London with 100 people. I've done shows in Finland. I've done shows in a bar in Dublin where like 75 people showed up for an acoustic sort of bar gig that I did. And yeah, if I play at the Twisted Olive, if 6 people show up, it's great, which I love. It's great, but it's fine. Yeah, I'm like the most unfamous famous person you'll ever meet. I'm not sure why. It's all good. It's all good. I think people know me through the Philadelphia Funk Authority way more than from my skeptical adventures in podcasting. People know the band and they'll be like, "Oh, you're the drummer in that band." My favorite story of that is I was at Music Fest and I bumped into my FedEx delivery guy. He was there with his family walking around, and we're both enjoying Music Fest. And I don't know the guy's name, but I know him because I see him every day. And so we always chat and stuff. And so I saw him and I said, "Oh, like, how's it going?" He's like, "Oh, it's going great. Great festival. It's been really fun." I said, "Have you seen anything cool? Like, what's the best thing you've seen?" And he said, "I saw this one band. It was the Philadelphia, some kind of funky something." I'm like, "The Philadelphia Funk Authority." He's like, "Yeah." I said, that's my band." He's like, "You're in that band?" He's like, "Yeah, that's my band." And he said, "The guy that does the announcements, like with the deep voice, like that, boy, that guy." I said, "That's me." He said, "You do the announcements? That's you?" I said, "Yeah, that's me." And that's my career. That's basically encapsulates my career. Like, people have no idea that, oh, you're that guy? Oh, okay, cool. That's great. So, and I'm completely happy with that. I am completely satisfied with that. So, but it is odd. I'm not quite sure what the deal is. When I win the Emmy or the Tony or the Oscar, I'll come back. I promise.
This way you can run on the canal trail by yourself.
Exactly. There was one time that a friend of mine was visiting from upstate New York. This is a couple of years back, and we just went for a walk down Main Street. I wanted to show him the, Church Street and whatever. So we're just walking down Main, and by pure happenstance, pure coincidence, like I bumped into 4 people that knew me, and they weren't necessarily friends. I think one was a friend, and then one was like a shopkeeper, and one was like a FedEx guy. So as I'm walking down Main Street, like, it felt like every third person said, "Hey, George." And my friend looked at me and he said, "You're Frank Sinatra." And I'm like, "No, I promise you, this does not happen. This is I promise this does not happen." Like, but again, totally fine with it.
I wonder if your heat map of popularity kind of parallels the Skeptic's Guide, since you.
Oh yeah, I mean, completely. I mean, any kind of external, national, even albeit international exposure has been piggybacked on those people's shoulders. Yeah, the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, if you were unaware, is a wonderful podcast. Wonderful human beings, most important. I mean, they do a great show that's really informative and has actual skeptical content in it that's important, and they've been doing it forever. They're among the first to ever done it. But they are genuinely so unbelievably nice and welcoming and generous, and are driven to help not just individuals like me or individuals like you, but just the community. And their diligence has just come through in their success. I mean, they have 100,000 downloads a week or whatever it is, plus. They're at 100 million downloads for the life of their show, which is just wonderful. But they've earned every stitch of it. And I often get asked, what are they like? Are they like they are? And they are like what they are on the show. They are just wonderful. They interact with each other in the nicest way, but they're also, 3 of them are brothers that can go at it in the best way and then hug it out. And that's when I know, that's when I knew that I was kind of on the inside with them, when I could sit at a table during a meal with the novellas and watch them have a blowout over, like, whether the Hitchens video should go first or second in the presentation we're doing, or whether that giant spider is worthy of a story, and to watch the giant blowout kind of happen and just sort of sit there and be like, well, they're comfortable enough in front of me. I guess I'm in. That's kind of cool. All right, cool. And then it's 90 seconds, then it's done, and then they hug it out and they're good to go. But it's and those are rare, believe me. But it's, when you're doing, like, just for instance, 2 weeks ago, we did a 12-hour show. We did a 12-hour live YouTube show for 12 hours from Steve's basement. And there is such an inordinate amount of stress and preparation and technical nonsense that goes into doing a production like that. All the coordination. And then added to that, all the COVID precautions that we took. We literally had these, we installed these plastic barriers into the set, but we made them invisible so you couldn't see them on camera, which was so cool. So like you looked at the set, we're all sitting at this desk and it looks like we're all sitting together, but we were actually separated by these huge plastic sheets that had the green, whatever that tape is called, that, you know, the green screen tape that made the edge of the plastic sheet invisible. So it looked like we were all sitting together. So people in the chat like, why aren't you separated? We're like, no, we're sitting next to these. So again, adding that to the stress of everything, and they just pulled it off, and it was wonderful. And the entire time they're just incredibly cool and nice, and their families are wonderful and their children are wonderful. And I can't say enough wonderful things about the SGU. If you don't listen to them, subscribe and check them out, because it's just great. But yes, as to your question, no, there's no doubt that I would not have nearly the same profile that I have now in the rest of the world outside of Pennsylvania that I do. It's because of them and because of me. I'm like a barefoot skier on the back of their boat, just hanging on, and hopefully I'll crash into the dock at some point.
Don't marginalize yourself so much. I think you definitely bring humor. You're like my pretty much sole humor, skeptical kind of podcast out there, and it just lightens up, I think, a lot of the, sometimes too serious skeptic topics.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. Yes, I consider myself the brain sorbet of the skepticism movement. That's my job, and I'm completely happy with that. Completely happy with that.
Yeah, I think the extravaganza probably wouldn't have happened without you.
Yeah. Again, there are particular skill sets that we each have, which is lovely. I mean, Jay has the vision of making the production work. He's got the big ideas. Like we'll have 19 cameras. That's Jay. And then Steve is the realist who then goes, no, we'll have 5 cameras. So that's a perfect balance between them. I have the MC kind of sense of what makes a good show. Is this interesting? Is the audience engaged? Are they going to remain interested? What's going too long? What's not long enough? What do we need to mine? I'm pretty good at doing that in real time. So like, this is funny. We're not going to move off from this, or this is worn out. Let's move on. Having the ability to sort of the self-aware MC nature of this is fantastic. Having that, but being aware it's not to get too cheesy. Yeah, that's my skill that I bring to them. And we always talk about the third idea, the collaborative nature of the third idea, where person A has one idea, person B has the second idea, and then the third idea comes about, which is better than A or B, but wouldn't have happened without A or B. And that's the beauty of collaboration, that when you get into that collaborative motion of like, what if we tried, penguins? And then B goes, well, not penguins, but how about like penguins on surfboards? And it's like, well, no, not penguins on surfboards, penguins on, parachutes. And you go, oh, penguins on parachutes. Perfect. That's what we want to do. And you wouldn't have gotten to penguins on parachutes without the penguins on surfboards, penguins on parachutes. And they are so good at that. They're so good about not owning something or not being able to see that third idea or other idea is better than the original idea. That's a very difficult thing in dealing with creatives, because someone will bring an idea forward and there's such an ownership of it, of like, look at this beautiful thing I've created. I have this idea. I came up with this. I'm so happy. This is going to be so fantastic. And someone else goes, well, and that can be difficult to sort of go, oh crap, you know what? You're right. It's not going to work. Yeah, your idea. But wait, what if we? And that's the wonderful thing, and that's what's so good about them, and I think why they're so successful. But thank you for saying that, Brian. I appreciate it.
It was Bill, but nonetheless. Any closing remarks that you would like to share with us to kind of inspire us to stay in good humor in this?
Yeah, whatever, self-medicating is a very delicate equation that needs to be balanced in the most perfect way. We need to find those things that give us solace in this moment, and we need to be able to be delicate with ourselves, that if maybe the unhealthiest thing is not the best for us right now, but it gives us moments of solace. Like, yes, we are aware that, watching Netflix for 10 hours on a Sunday is not as good as it could be for us physically towards our health. Having that fifth or seventh piece of pizza, even though it just numbs the pain, is not the best thing for us, let alone any kind of, smoking or drinking or any kind of recreational chemistry that one might partake in is not necessarily the best. In these times, and I was just saying to someone else lately, we're living right here, right now. Like, our whole world is right here. And we forget that there is this entire existence outside of this. This is the problem we're dealing with right now. And so everything is stuffed into this little viewfinder, this pair of binoculars that we're kind of living in. And so all the problems, so sometimes the smallest of problems seem gigantic because it's all we have. And so the frustrations and the ennui and the anxiety can be overwhelming. And we have to be okay with allowing ourselves to be okay with allowing ourselves. we have to be okay with allowing ourselves to allow ourselves to have that maybe sort of little extra piece of pizza or that cigarette. Again, I'm not a proponent of any kind of unhealthy human behavior, but if it does give you a moment of solace, it's all right. It's all right. And ultimately, I think there are positive. I have a segment on my show called "Tell Me Something Good," which just deals with good news. It's just a little segment that just presents some bit of good news. Like yesterday, I said IKEA has bought 60,000 acres of forest in Georgia to have it not be torn down and turned into condos. Yay! Like that's awesome. That's great. There are things like that. The vaccines have been developed. Yeah, getting them out to everybody is going to be a pain. There's going to be people that are not going to want to take them. And it's going to be its own pain in the ass. A lot of things that have changed over the last 4 years are being changed back. We're being reincorporated into organizations that we should be reincorporated into. There are small steps, and in no way am I a Pollyanna about all of this. In no way. It's a horrible thing we're going to be dealing with for a long, long time. But find the small victories. I mean, there is a Rush song called "One Little Victory," which is a wonderful mantra. It's this idea of, do one thing that provides you with a sense of victory in your day, in your morning, in your evening. And that can be 10 push-ups. That can be going for a walk. I mean, all I do now is walk. That is basically my recreation of any kind. Every day, 3 to 4 miles a day, probably I'm walking, whether it's at night, whether it's during the day. Get yourself one of those glowy little glow-in-the-dark vests, you put on and you walk around town. Especially now with the snow out, it's at night, it's absolutely magical. You walk around, you see the south side, you look at South Mountain from the north side, and it's like this snow globe. It's just this beautiful Pennsylvanian snow globe with all the light reflecting off the snow and everything. And you find this moment of Satori and you go like, wow, that looks really beautiful. You find that sunset, you go, wow, that looks really beautiful. And you take a moment and be like, okay, I had this little moment, communicate with a friend, help a neighbor if you can, do it safely, donate some money. It's amazing how good that feels. You find an organization and give them $50. It's like, it feels good. It's scientifically proven to make you feel good when you donate. How great is that? You give $50 to an organization that needs it. It's like, So those little things, find one little victory every day, and then make it 2 little victories, and then maybe make it 5 or 10 little victories. And it's unbelievably difficult, and we're all challenging and being challenged, and it's okay. It's okay to cry to the heavens, like, it's okay to do that too, but rely on your friends that are here. Yeah. It's okay to rely on your friends that are here and reach out and say, I'm having a crap day. And if someone reaches out to you and say they're having a crap day, say, man, I hear you. Tell me about it. And just listen. Tell me about your crap day. What happened today? And don't judge. Don't offer advice. Don't proffer anything unless they're asking for it. Just say, oh, that must have sucked. Oh man, that must have sucked. Oh God. And then what happened? Oh, that must have sucked too. God, how are you dealing with it? I'm sorry. Want to go for a walk? Let's go for a walk. That's it. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning with me, your snowy Sunday morning. It looks like the snow is slowing down a little bit, which is good. And if you're interested, geologicpodcast.com is where my show happens every week. I also do a series on YouTube every other Friday, which is called 7 Songs, which is where I pick 7 songs on a theme, and then I perform them, but I also talk about them. So it might be like the last theme we had was, what was the last theme we had? What was our last theme? I don't remember what our last theme was.
Drop D tuning.
Drop D tuning, yeah, different kind of, thank you. It was a different kind of guitar tuning that was used for all these songs. I've had band themes. I did all Police songs one time. I did songs that all had colors in the titles. I did songs that all had numbers in the titles. And not only do I perform the song, but I talk about what makes that song interesting or why necessarily I thought it was kind of fun. So even if you know nothing about music or theory, you can tune in and learn like, what is drop D tuning? And I didn't know that Nirvana and Soundgarden use drop D tuning a lot. And that's why it sounds all Nirvana-y and Soundgarden-y. Though that's every other Friday. This week's episode is going to be this Friday. And the subject, of course, is going to be love. Love is going to be in the title of every song that I play, because it's 2 days before Valentine's Day. So you can do that. And like I said, check out the SGU as well, because they're just awesome and fantastic. And yeah.
Thanks so much, George, for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
The rest of the dye that I have and dye my hair. No, stay here.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody. Brian and Ro and Ron and Diana and Tim and John and Donna and Paul and Megan's iPad. Thank you, Megan's iPad. I appreciate it very much. And Kave and EPH. How do you pronounce your name? Is it Eph? Or is that just a computer name? Because if it's F.
ETH.
ETH?
ETH.
Oh, that's awesome. Is that Celtic?
Like Ephraim.
Oh, like Ephraim.
Yeah, it's Welsh.
Or Ephraim. ETH?
Well, that is Welsh. You're wasting the Welsh.
I love it. Well, thank you, everybody. I so appreciate it.
Thank you,
Be
Joe.
safe.
Thank you.
One little victory.